Welcome to the Grumpy Social Workers podcast with me, Soyeb
and me, Siobhan McLean. Here's your place for social work conversations that keep things real. Today, our grumpy topic is virtual working and AI and all that kind of new ways of working stuff. And I know you're so much more organised than me, and you always send a few notes over. And you have come up with a brilliant sort of opening question and theme. So if I give you that opening question, and then we can maybe chat about it. So when I read it, I thought, that's brilliant, Shoyeb. So you've come up with the theme, virtual working and AI, and then this kind of subtitle question of, are we transforming social work or losing something important? And I thought, what a fabulous question, Shoyeb.
Oh, thanks, Siobhan. Absolutely. But I have to confess, I came up with that, which is really weird, isn't it? Because we're talking about AI. I was doing some prep work for this, and I put lots of information to AI about some of the themes that we might want to look at during the podcast. And it came up with that theme as one of the first themes. But in some ways, I have come up with that. I've just got AI to brush it up a little bit and make it look more tidy. It is AI that came up with it. And it's a really interesting subject, this, for me, Siobhan, because on one sense, I'm going to be really grumpy about the use of AI. And then in one sense, I'm going to be like really positive and be really grumpy why other people are not positive about AI as well. So it's one of those subject areas that in some ways you can say it's fairly new, but it's not. And I think in some ways, I think it's fairly new because for social workers, it's something that we just started using and not everybody has. So in terms of that bit, in terms of me getting really grumpy about the use of AI, it's really interesting. When I attend meetings with universities or professional lead for social workers, there's always kind of a consensus within those groups that students and QSWs should not be using AI. And I sit there getting really frustrated and grumpy because I think we need to look at it a bit more with much more of an open view, because I think there are lots of benefits of using AI. I think to shut it down completely is really wrong, because then we're not influencing AI either. So if that theme you just talked about, Siobhan, I've fed lots of information to AI around social work and the use of AI, and it's kind of come up with some themes and things for me. And hopefully that means that the next person that puts something to AI, you'll already have that information that you can kind of help generate more information around. And I think as social workers, we do need to influence AI with our values, ethics, themes, topics, and all that kind of stuff as well. Does that kind of make sense? So it's a really strange one, that really.
I just think it's so interesting what you're saying there, Shoyeb. And in a way, what's really interesting, I suppose, for this podcast is we're both coming at this same topic, both of us grumpy about it, but grumpy for different reasons. Because I think I'm the grumpy one because I'm just not keen on AI for lots of different reasons. And maybe we'll talk about some of those as we go through. But on the other hand, I do agree with you that AI is going to be used, and that we need, as social workers, to get on board with that, because it's moving faster than anybody can even anticipate and understand, really. So we've really got to get in there. We can't just not use it. And I was at an event. Well, actually, I don't use it. I choose not to use it. But I'm not going to tell other people not to use it, I suppose is what I'm saying. So I was at an event recently. It was an event for practice educators, and I was doing a presentation. And then the head of the social work of the university it was at came along, and at that bit of the conference program, it was supposed to be about AI and social work. And I think, she was given half an hour or something. And she said, actually, I only need 2 minutes to talk to you about it, because all I'm going to say is, don't use AI on placements. And we've told our students you must not use AI on placements. And there you go, that's it. And I was thinking, but that's awful, because we know students are going to be using AI, and there may be some positives. I see a lot of negatives, but I think we need to educate people on the use of AI, and we need to talk about it, and we need to be open about it. And I talk to my daughters about it because I do find younger people have kind of grown up with it. I started social work when nobody had a computer, so literally there was not. I remember the first day a computer arrived in our social services office, So I'm of that era. But they use AI a lot for lots of different things. And one of my daughters is a teacher. And so I was asking her about, pupils must use AI for homework. So how do you manage that and navigate that? And she was saying, look, what I do is I know they're going to use it. So what I do is I say, here are the things you cannot ask AI. And what I want you to do is alongside of your assignment, I want you to submit something that says, these are the questions that I asked AI. And this is why I asked those questions of AI. And she said, then what I'm getting is I'm actually getting their critical thinking in with that. And that's the way she does it as a teacher. And I was thinking, see, that's really helpful because I think we need to be open about it and we need to have those open discussions about, yes, I've used AI and here's how I've used it, rather than if we're saying to people, do not use it, they're going to use it and say they haven't. And what help is that? So I'm grumpy for loads of different reasons. And I know you use AI, and it's really funny that I thought that was a great title. And then you say to me, oh, that was AI, because maybe that's about telling me, Siobhan, you do need to get on board. But, I'm grumpy for lots of different reasons. So let me throw one of the reasons at you that I'm really grumpy. It's the whole sort of eco stuff about it, the amount of water that it uses to keep those data centers and, the kind of what it's doing to the environment. And sometimes for just what I would call silly things, like there was this craze recently, wasn't there, where people got little pictures of themselves done on AI. I could see loads of social workers were doing that and posting them on social media and look at what AI says a social worker does. And I was thinking, have we thought about the impact on the environment? Now, don't get me wrong, I have never seen myself as a kind of eco warrior or anything like that. But I've seen I've read bits about how much water it takes and so on. And I think, what to do an image of myself? Do I really want to waste things that the planet really needs? And I suppose maybe because I've worked internationally, I've seen the impact internationally of global warming on communities and societies. And I just feel like, no, let's not go there. But how many social workers actually know about that? And the eco impact, I suppose, is a question. So there's one of my grumpy reasons not to use it, is the impact on water.
I've never really thought about it that way, Siobhan, but it's really interesting. And I think in terms of environment and social workers is on supporting kind of that green theme is something we don't often talk about, do we? And I think it's really important that we should, because we kind of talk about human rights, and like you've just said, you've seen the impact that can have, and just that one theme around human rights and people they should have the ability to kind of live in spaces where they're not having to suffer with poverty and have an impact on things like that because of that as well. And it's a really kind of deep thought, really, because in some ways, yeah, absolutely, in terms of us using AI and technology or more, what impact are we having on those kind of themes around poverty, homelessness, lack of food, shelter, etc., etc. So it's not something, and I think it's something we don't think about as social workers. That's definitely a gap there, isn't there? That we need to kind of be focusing on a bit more. Really interesting that. But I think,
sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of kind of that, if you look at technology full stop, I think the environment is changing. The environment of social work is changing in terms of the use of technology. That is increasing a lot now. So it's how we kind of balance the two, I suppose, in some ways as well.
It is. And I think it's about using it for things that are essential. I wouldn't object to. But what you were saying there about the environmental issues and stuff, I do think it links back to the podcast that we did on anti-oppressive practice, because Lena Dominelli, who, in my sort of earlier career was very much one of the leading voices on anti-oppressive practice, is now really trying to lead what's called green social work and thinking about that. And I wonder whether some of the time we should put some of these connections together. It's what we do as social workers, is we connect things. But I think we're talking about, I hear some groups talking a lot about green social work and eco-social work. And then I hear other people talking a lot about AI in social work. And maybe we need to just bring some of those things together. I don't know. I went to an event just recently on AI and social work, and it was for a group of practice educators. And they were talking about how they were using AI. And one of the people was saying, I use it when I want to think about, I don't know, when I use it to think about what colour I want to paint my walls, or what colour I want this, or what colour. She used it for everything. And I don't think she had any idea of the environmental impact of that. So I think that's one of the things is, as social workers, we should be taking that kind of really critical stance on what's going on with this and what is the impact of this, and not just jumping on board with all the new ideas. And I also think, and one thing I know you are very aware of and you're working hard to address in AI, is that inherent bias. Because I've been chatting to somebody recently who's doing some research on AI, and she was saying that if you put like a case study, because I don't know a lot about it. So, but she was saying you put a case study into AI and on all of the different systems, and you put in it something that would clearly, for social workers, raise concerns about racism and thinking about anti-racist practice. And all of the AI stuff, it just does not bring that up, because that inherent bias that, what AI is drawing on is there. So I just wonder whether, are we really being critical enough? Are we jumping on too quickly onto something? So, that question that came up at the beginning, or are we losing something? I think, yes, we're losing a lot, and we're not talking enough about what we're losing. And I wonder whether people, because I'm not keen on it, I don't use it myself, whether they think that's me just trying to say, let's not ever use it. And I'm not saying that, because I do know that people are going to use it. But what I want us to do is just be a bit more critical about it, take a real, link in some of those things we talked about in the previous podcast about anti-oppressive practice, link some of those things into our use of AI, so we bring it all together. I just think it's really, the ethical sort of side of it, just for me, is really concerning. I also don't understand how to use it properly. But I'm not, I'm not adverse to learning that.
Yeah. I mean, just listening to that, Siobhan, some kind of thoughts from that in terms of, I wasn't a fan of AI, and I remember doing a session quite early on when AI was definitely becoming more popular with a group of NQSWs from the global majority background, and we looked at exactly that in terms of that inherent bias and the language and the terminology that AI was spouting out, and how that may further those kind of anti-oppressive views and prejudice and discrimination and things. And I think it was at that point that I thought, well, I'm not a fan of AI, but it's happening, and if we don't influence AI with our ethics and values and our views on prejudice, discrimination, anti-oppressive practice, etc., then AI is just not gonna kind of learn that. And if you kind of look at social media and stuff, and there's many reasons. I think a lot of people have kind of come up with certain apps and things on social media. They don't access certain social media, because when you do, you can see what it spouts out, hate, discrimination, etc., and you can see how the world is changing in terms of that, and how that then influences people. So it's how much we can influence AI that it doesn't result in that happening. And I think we still will get there, but I think we're not doing anything. I just think we're so far behind with influencing AI that I'm fearful that when social workers do start putting stuff into AI, it's going to use terminology and things that is not going to be appropriate. But our new generation of social workers are using terminology and things already that is influenced by social media, the political world and stuff. And I know we do a lot of work around that. And I think actually the social workers that are coming into the profession are very aware of that at the moment. But I'm more fearful about the next generation stuff that are coming in. So it's something that that really worries me when I think about a lot, because there is a lot of influence going on there. And I think in the current climate, there's lots of benefits of it. I know when I've used AI, for example, that But we started off the conversation in terms of I do some preparation for a podcast, just so I've got some themes and stuff ready, just in case we get stuck with what we're talking about. But yeah, I probably did the work in about 5 minutes that would have taken me potentially half an hour, 45 minutes, which then means that I've got another half an hour to spend doing something else. And I was also, when we're on that subject about green and the environment and stuff, when I first came into social work, I remember I was really enthusiastic I remember setting up an allotment group where I used to work because we had a lot of green space there. We had the big garden. And it was for mental health service users. So we started an allotment group there. So when individuals came for appointments and stuff, they could actually walk around the allotment, get involved with it, do something, and take some stuff away with them as well. So that benefited their kind of diet and stuff then as well. We had a cycling group, a walking group, etc., etc. Now people, like you said, turn to AI immediately for answers and stuff. And that's the other fear, isn't it? And there's a ripple effect on that as well. Because I think AI and virtual working, there's a lot of links there as well. And that's my other frustration. I remember I've been to a couple of talks at universities over the last probably 2 years. And it really frustrates me when I go and you've got 80, 90 student social workers sat there and you're talking to them and they're all on their laptops and mobile phones. The first time I just let that ride, and then I had a chat with the tutor afterwards and I said, what's going on here? There's no interaction with me really. And she said to me, well, they are interacting with you, but they're doing it via the computers and phones. They're actually making notes and recording stuff and getting AI to summarize your discussions and stuff. And I just thought, so the next time I went, I actually said, I've made the effort to come and talk to you. Please give me some interaction. Because if you went to see somebody that, for example, had mental health issues, that was paranoid, and that was paranoid about computers, technology, people against them, and if this is the interaction they're going to see, they're not going to engage with you at all. There's going to be no rapport. So I think there's a lot bigger kind of wider subject area kind of that leads to as well. But that really frustrates me, the use of social media and stuff. But yeah, it's how we get that balanced right, because we do need to.
We do. And I think there's a thing now about, like me saying, years, I can remember the first computer arriving, and my goodness, it was huge, and it was only a manager that had this computer, and we were all terrified of touching it, to be honest. But now it feels like social workers are just constantly plugged into some kind of device or laptop or something. And I do think, a digital detox, as they call it, is really helpful for our thinking, for, like you said, being in allotments, being in away from the digital can just be so helpful to people. And I think sometimes we are too over-connected to things. And so I wonder whether, yes, all of this is connected, the AI and the virtual working. I mean, there's so many advantages to virtual working. For me, I do a lot of my training delivery now online. I'm not, previously I would have spent, I'd been doing a different training day every day of the week, and I'd have been driving then and staying in hotels and hours of travel. And now I'm not. I'm delivering training online. I'm in my own space. I don't have to do a lot of traveling. So there's loads of advantages to me of that. But I think there are also some disadvantages. For example, that I'm still very committed to being a practice educator. Just worked with 2 students. I do all of that face to face. I wouldn't do any of that online. I come to conferences and speak face to face because I think it's really important there. So I think it's good to have a balance. But I think one of the things that really gets me, and you were mentioning social media, is I join lots of social media groups, on some of the social media platforms. They have little groups of social workers that come together, and I always try and join as many of those as ever I see. And I very, very rarely post in them. But I do like to look at what are people posting, because it gives you an idea of what are some of the issues. And I see loads of posts now saying, anybody advise on a job I can do entirely from home? I don't really want to leave home, just want to stay. And I think, why would you want to be a social worker if you just don't want to see people? It's almost like that. I don't want to talk to people. Well, what are you being a social worker for then? So, I know that some of the people that we support as social workers like online connection, and there are advantages to online connection for people that we support. But some of what we do has to be face to face, like you said, has to be building rapport, has to be. And yet increasingly I'm seeing people who almost just want a completely online job. And I think, well, go and join a call centre then. Why would you want to be a social worker if, you know? So I do think that's a bit of an issue, that kind of entirely virtual working. It's a little bit like AI, isn't it? I think like lots of things in moderation, but don't just jump straight into entirely doing this one thing, I suppose is my thoughts. What do you think about virtual working?
Yeah, it's that disconnect, isn't it? Yeah, I think again, it's getting that balance right and working out which training sessions, which meetings, which one-to-one interactions are appropriate or not. Virtual. I think thinking about grumpy social workers, I think not having interaction does make us more grumpier as well. So I know for a fact that if I spend a full week for whatever reason doing virtual work and then I meet a bunch of social workers or have to attend a face-to-face, I'm much more grumpier. The fact that I've got to get into a car, drive somewhere, navigate all the traffic and stuff, and then sit there when I'm thinking, I don't need to be here for 2 hours. We could do this in half an hour. It's all that kind of definitely makes me more grumpy, but I really enjoy it. Once I am out, actually really enjoy that interaction. And I think, again, for training sessions and things like that as well, you get much more engagement as well. So there are some training sessions which I think, yeah, you can actually do virtually and guaranteed that people are sat there with their laptops on, emailing and things as well. And I think the bare minimum in terms of virtual working, people should have their cameras on as a minimum. I think, I attend face-to-face meetings where people have their laptops with them and they're catching up on emails, but they're there, they're present, that they're still engaging with the meeting and they kind of, when there's somewhat relevant for them to kind of be listening to and be engaged with, they'll kind of stop emailing and stuff there and pay attention. So, because sometimes you attend meetings where the entire meeting is irrelevant for you personally. Yeah, and I think, through COVID, we had, for example, DOLS assessments. A lot of them were taking place virtually. It really frustrates me even now as a BIA where I've been out to do an assessment and when I get the mental health assessment back from the doctor, 80-90% of the time it's been done via phone or virtually. I just don't understand why. And it's almost justified to say, well, they've not really got the cognition and they felt that they weren't going to get anything else by attending face-to-face. If you're 80, 90 and you've never really used the phone, you've never really had video phone calls, how do you know that by you being present there is going to give you a different perspective? Because you're going to see that person and you're going to see the environment, you're going to see the interactions, you're going to see the body language. That might completely change your view on something as well. And I think that's the bit we miss as well. And again, I think that we could talk about this for hours really, Siobhan, but I think we've talked about supervision previously as well. And I think we touched on the importance of welfare and the stresses that social workers working at the moment as well. And I know definitely when we were doing pretty much all office-based work, you could see when a colleague walked in and they looked stressed, unhappy, or there was something going on, they felt more comfortable offloading to you as well. So all that kind of aspect is disappearing as well, I think, as well. But yeah, so it's something that needs to be monitored, I think, and getting the balance right.
Yeah. I think as well, I think it's different in different areas, isn't it? So where I am now in Northern Ireland, there's very little home-based working. You go into an office and it's still a very busy office. It's still very vibrant. Everybody's still there. You don't see so much headphones as much. So, I'm still seeing that students are still expected to be in the office every day. They don't do any homeworking as students and so on. But then, there's some authorities where they've sold off every building. Everybody's working from home. How are students and newly qualified workers learning? Because you know that you learn from being in a busy office and you know that you learn from overhearing other people's conversations and you can just look up and ask a question of somebody and there are lots of people there. And it's much more difficult, I think, with home-based working. So again, I think we need a balance. I think there might be times where, look, I've got this detailed report to write and I need to be in a space where I'm not going to be disturbed. Okay, work from home, that's great. But I think home-based working all of the time means that we're taking a lot of that great experience out of offices. So all of that, situated learning that we talk about as practice educators. But I think also, even, it's the situated learning theory is pretty old now, but so it's not maybe kept up with some of the language. But I think situated curiosity is really important because, I think, and this maybe links back a bit to AI as well. There's things like if you're sitting in an office, someone will say, I wonder if, or they'll
Mm.
ask questions or reflect together. Whereas nowadays, what I find is people don't do any wondering anymore. Sometimes I'm sat with my daughters and I'll say, I wonder if, and they, in 2 minutes, they give me the answer. It's a yes or a no answer because they've found it on Google or whatever. And I just think, no, actually, I was quite enjoying wondering. I quite like wondering and I'd like you to wonder with me and I'd like you to, because that's what brings reflection. And that's what really, I think, grows our thinking and develops our analytical skills. And I think there's not enough kind of that sort of wondering chat and connection chat. I notice it with training that when I'm doing training online, and when it first started, I used to panic. I think I must be in the wrong online room or something because there's nobody here, and it's 9:28, and then at 9:30, bang, everybody would arrive. Whereas if you're in a room, people are arriving from sometimes even as early as 9 o'clock, and they're chatting with one another, and they are doing that connections. Whereas now people click from one thing into another. And I get the idea where we talk about being more efficient, but is that actually more efficient? Can there be, some of these grumpy conversations that we've had, I've learned loads from. And I think if you're not having these grumpy conversations, one of the reasons we said we were going to do this podcast was so that people could have that opportunity to listen into experienced conversations, So I wonder if we're losing a lot of that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we are. A couple of things on what you've just said. One of my roles I have is I'm working as almost like a duty worker. So, and we've got a call center that screens any phone calls coming in, then they send it to us. So as soon as I get a phone call, I go red. As soon as that phone call's finished, I go green, which means that which then makes the call center perceive that I'm free to take another call.
Right.
So, and if I don't answer the phone, so somebody might ring me and say they're feeling suicidal or that there's a safeguarding issue going on. I put the phone down, then I need to process that information, analyze it, and then probably make some notes and stuff. But I'm getting another phone call immediately. And if I don't answer that phone, they'll then ask me why I've not answered the phone because I'm green. So then that puts pressure on you to think, well, I need to get this done because I've gone green now. I might get another phone call in 30 seconds. So it definitely has an impact on the way we work. And I was just, I think the two words came to mind when you were talking there, Siobhan, as well, hypothesis and analysis as well. And I think social media, AI, I think is made individuals want or expect answers immediately. So if you want an answer, you put it into AI or social media and you get an immediate response. So where does that leave us in terms of, like you said, having that process of analyzing, reflecting, hypothesizing, because we're going to get that answer immediately. And once we've got that answer, do we still give it that humanistic touch, which we should be, because at that time we can still do the analysis and hypothesizing, saying, well, AI said that. Do I agree with that or not? Is that accurate? Does that align with my social values, my personal values? Do we do that? Or we've got the answer right, let's crack on. Because it's based on, some of those answers are evidence-based, so they might be linked to legislation or research, so we can justify why we've kind of gone with that answer as well. So it's quite scary when you think of it in that sense as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it can be. And one of the things that, social workers always talk about is a lack of time.
Yeah.
AI is supposed to give us more time, but I wonder whether when we've got a lack of time, if it's churned out a report, do we just think, oh, it's done the report? I just wonder whether we're, as you say, really looking at it and thinking, is that right? Is that, so yeah, there's so many really interesting things. It's fascinating, isn't it? When you think about us as grumpy social workers, been qualified this long, how much has changed in just the last 6 years, really. It's since COVID, isn't it, really, the big changes, the big online changes. AI is, even just in a year, AI has gone from kind of very little to huge. And it's interesting to think what might come. If so much change has happened in those 6 years, change has been constant in my career. I mean, I think we are the profession of change. We're trying to support people to change and through change and so on. So I think we should be able to respond well to change if we're good social workers. But it's just really interesting to think about, gosh, if that much change has happened in 6 years, how much change is going to come in the next 6 years? It's a fascinating thing to think about, really, isn't it? And
it is.
That'll take me close to retirement the next 6 years. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll be fascinated by the changes and I'll be thinking, how exciting, I want to stay. Or maybe I'll be thinking, no, actually, I'm ready to retire. I mean, I can't ever see myself retiring, but maybe if there's so many changes and maybe if I don't keep up, I'll be ready to. I don't know. But the changes are massive. And I suppose one final thing that I would want to say is, you know, me and social work theory, I love a bit of social work theory. You know, Erickson and his 8 ages. And I think I'm going to his 8th age now because I'm 58. I've just been 58 last month. So I think I'm getting towards that kind of what he talks about, integrity versus despair is the final stage, which always worries me. But I'm holding on still tight to Erickson's 7th stage, which he describes as generativity versus self-absorption. And he says that's where people in middle ages, he describes it, is where people get connected to what's going on in their outer world and they become really interested in what's going on in their outer world and all of that, which I think social workers should be doing anyway. But I'm wondering whether, is my interest in green social work and my fear of social workers becoming too isolated and working in silo, is that also connected to where I'm at in terms of my own human growth and development? Because it kind of is spot on, the fact that I've become so much more interested in eco issues that I wasn't before. And I'm relating those to all the things that are going on and all the changes. I don't know. I just think it's really, sometimes when we think about social work theory, we don't apply it to ourselves. And I'm thinking about applying that kind of Erickson to me. You don't need to give an answer to it at all, Shoaib. It's just something I've been thinking about. Wow. Because I also have thought about crisis intervention in terms of what happened during COVID and how we responded afterwards as a profession. I've also thought about it using that theory. I always like to, when I'm reflecting, bring a bit of theory in, you know. So, but for myself, I've just started to think about that. Am I at stage 7 or am I moving to stage 8 of Erickson? And what does that mean for me? Am I at integrity versus despair about the future of social work? Absolutely, I'm at integrity. I feel like we've got a great future. So we do have a great future. That's absolutely where I am. So I don't want the grumpiness to come across as, I think this is terrible. I do think we need to keep up with AI. I think we need to influence it as you do. You've got a lot longer to go in the profession. So, you know, it'll be interesting for you to see what goes on and what happens with AI. But yeah, I think I agree with you. We need to lead on it. We need to do something with it.
I don't know how much longer I will last in social work, Siobhan. And maybe we need to come up with a new cycle and add another stage into it, which includes the grumpy stage and how you kind of move on from that. There was lots to think about there, but I think one of the thoughts that jumped at me, Siobhan, when you were talking then and linking to social identity, because I think we spoke about this, didn't we, in terms of social workers and this kind of view now that if you're a social worker, you go and work in local authority. And when you were talking about the ecological systems, the environment, the green topic and theme as well, technology, and I was kind of thinking again where this is where when we kind of talk about, and we've said we do move with the times, but I think sometimes we don't move with the times quick enough and we don't modernize social work quick enough. And maybe you spoke about veterinary social work there, you to say, and I remember when you told me about that, I was like, what, seriously? And I was really pleased that there is something like that out there. So maybe we need to have social workers in technology and kind of other venues and spaces so that when they're talking about AI and technology and the changes happening, we can influence it with our social values and ethics and really get that group or the technological environment or groups to kind of really think about the ethics and values around and influence it with those kind of social values and ethics as well. Because it is changing. You've got all the stuff around assistive technology and stuff as well coming in now. I think there's a lot to think about there, a lot to think about. I'll kind of end with one note as well, because I went to a training session recently because they're changing the systems we use. The system they've developed is doing a certain assessment, and the program now that they're implementing pretty much tells you how to go through that assessment, and it's almost dictating the stages you have to follow as a social worker. And I was grumpy, but only for a few minutes because I didn't want to kind of hijack the session. And I did say at one stage, so where's the person-centered element of this then? Because everyone now has to go through that process, and the computer is going to pretty much say to me yes or no at the end of it. And it's kind of making that decision without my hypothesis, my gut feeling, everything else that I kind of think about when I'm doing an assessment. Somebody might say to me they're not hearing voices, but they're clearly presenting as they are, the way they're distracted, the way they were looking at things. So instead of scoring them 0 to say they're not hearing voices, I would actually score them at 10. So yeah, I think there's lots for me to be grumpy about still to do with technology and AI and virtual working. But yeah. But I think for me, as a closing reflection, I think going back to kind of that theme that we've talked about throughout this podcast, really, in terms of we do need to move with the times, we do need to modernize social work, we do need to kind of influence AI and the new kind of technology that does come in, but be very conscious about and influence it with our social ethics and values and maintain those kind of humanistic social justice themes and like you said, in terms of that kind of green theme as well, and maybe think about that a bit more. I think for us all to kind of think about how do we think about that a bit more as well, how do we influence that a bit more as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I suppose it's about looking at what we always do in social work is look at the sort of benefits and losses. You know, what are we gaining, but also what are we losing? So I don't know if it was AI that did this for you, but you, in the notes you sent me, you had a kind of question that maybe we could leave listeners thinking about, which was what are we gaining through the changes that we've talked about today, things like the use of AI, things like virtual working, but what are we losing? And how do we ensure that social work remains fundamentally human? Because it is about a human-to-human connection, social work. So how do we maintain that in this bold new world, I suppose? And that's a question we can pose to our listeners.
Sounds great. Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed sharing this reflective space with us today. We are the Grumpy Social Workers, Siobhan McLean and Soyeb Aswarat. Listen out for more episodes in the future, and don't forget to let us know what you're feeling grumpy about.